All my heroes are writers. I'm fond of writers. And this year at Emirates Literature Festival, I saw Jessica Jarlvi and I
Yeah.
started following her. And recently I wrote to her that would you like to be on my podcast? And she's like, oh, I've seen you do magic. And I was just amazed. She won Monte Grippo Award in 2016 in Emirates Literature Festival. So I'm very excited to have her. Hi, Jessica. How are you?
Hi, how you doing?
Good, thanks. So tell me, how's Sweden?
Yeah, it's good. It's we've had some pretty good weather. It's like spring here, and I'm sort of in the countryside, so the one joy, I guess, being stuck here at the moment is being able to enjoy nature, going for walks along the sea, in the
Yeah.
woods, you know?
And what do you call it? The midsummer, which happens once a year, is going to come soon, right? What is it
Yes,
in June or July?
it's in June. Yeah, it's the
Yeah.
third Friday in June. Yeah, I'm really
Yeah.
hoping I'm not going to be still here though by then.
Yeah, you will be in Dubai. So remind me or tell me, how did we meet? What do you remember?
Yes, so it was in Burj Khalifa. I was actually going to meet with a friend who I hadn't seen in 15 years,
Okay.
who had flown in from the US, and it was her birthday. And you did some magic tricks with, it was like a group of Swedish women. And you were
I,
very good.
I,
I remember thinking, I wonder how you did that. It was a card trick, especially that you did. I could not work out how you did that. It was very clever.
what card trick was it? What do you remember? Do
I
you remember?
can't remember.
So I'll forgive you. It was a
I
ladies'
can't
night.
remember.
I'll forgive you.
Yes, exactly.
I'll perform there
There's a lot
every
of
Tuesday.
excitement that night. Yeah.
Perform there every, or used to perform there every Tuesday. So,
Right.
so I was reading your book. I'm almost, according to Kindle, I'm like 62% finished. I'm on
Yep.
55th chapter. I would love to know
Hmm.
your routine. I would love to know your habits, like how you write. Or let's go back to that book, your first one, When I Wake Up.
Yep.
What was your routine?
Hmm.
Like, how did you write it?
Well, that one I wrote a little bit differently to how I write now because I had a day job, and so I had to fit it in the evenings, on the weekends, and I had
Mm,
three children at the time. I now have four, but at the time I had three, and it was really just fitting it in whenever I could. My husband was doing an MBA at the time, so we would literally swap on the weekend. He would have a day, I'd take the kids, then it would be the other way around the next day.
mm,
So it was just yeah, it was just really fitting it in where I could. What I've learned and what I've come to appreciate is that you don't have to sit and wait for inspiration. If you have an hour, use that hour.
mm,
It doesn't really matter what you do as long as you're moving your story forward. Whether you write 100 words that you then going to delete tomorrow, you've learned something about your characters or about your book or about your plot. So it's advice that I'm really giving myself at the moment is to just you know you know be appreciative of anything that you achieve in one day,
mm.
because it's gonna get you close to that goal of having finished a novel. If I think back to my 20s, I had a lot of time and I didn't utilize it, and sometimes I think, why didn't I? But you know what, it's life. You learn as you go along.
Mm,
And I think it's just that we're fed this image that you have to sit there as a writer and kind of gaze out the window
mm,
waiting for inspiration to strike. I don't have time to wait for inspiration to strike these days,
yeah.
so I just get on with it.
I wonder what you were doing in your 20s, but I won't ask. But there's a saying
No,
that
it's fine.
amateur,
I was living
amateur
in
wait.
different countries.
No, but there's a saying I read somewhere that amateur waits for inspiration, professional goes to work every day. So
Right.
you have a target like 5 pages, 2 pages, or words. Do you force yourself?
No.
Or no?
Well, at the moment I'm editing, so I don't have a target as such. When I am writing, and I'm doing my first draft,
Mm,
I will have a very low target of like 500 words. Some writers even do more than 1,000. But if I have 1,000 as a goal,
mm.
and I don't achieve that goal, I'm not going to feel so great. But if I have a goal of 500, I know I'm going to hit it, and I'm going to feel really great. And hopefully, I'll even do more, and that will be even better, and I'll celebrate that. So
Okay.
I think a low target is the way to go.
Yeah, and you feel great. And that's the day you can ask, anyone can
Yeah.
ask you a favor and you'll do it, give them money and be happy, right?
Yeah.
It's-
I think you just have to celebrate the small achievements, rather than make it into this huge thing, because it's very overwhelming when you start
Mm,
writing a novel. I know so many people who've said, I've always wanted to write a novel, and they start out, they're really excited, and they get to, a stage where like maybe 10,000 words in, when they just don't have the energy or don't feel inspired or excited anymore. And the thing is, it is a pretty long commitment to write a
yeah.
novel. So if you have smaller targets, you're more likely to get it done.
Speaking of small targets, I was master class. I took a master class of short story by Joyce
Yeah.
Cole Oates, and it was so
Yes,
good.
I
I'm
love her.
fascinated by the woman, and she's one of your favorite authors or writers, right?
Yes, she is. She is.
What's
And I haven't actually done the masterclass, but I would absolutely love to do it. I think she's incredible.
Yeah, and she recommends writing short stories, and you get this psychological uplift when you
Right.
achieve that target, like you were talking about. So I'm really
Yeah.
fascinated by her, but I've never read any of her works. What would you recommend, or what do you
Okay.
like about her?
I think she's just very, she's a brilliant writer. It just really flows nicely. But she's also a very brave writer. She's very raw. She doesn't shy away from anything. She will just dive right in there. She doesn't care if it's controversial or, how people are going to receive it. She's just very brave writer, I think. I actually prefer her shorter novels, where I
Mm,
think she covers so much in such a short space. So yeah, and I think she's fabulous. She's also incredibly productive. I wish I was as productive as she is.
yeah, right. When I wake up is set in a small town. Is that the town you
Hmm.
grew up in? And when I was reading, I think it was the first or second chapter, you talked about like people from the small town, they don't open up much. Is
Hmm.
that true? Do you find, generally
Right.
speaking? So what's the difference, like growing
Um,
up in small town or a big town, and your
mhm.
experience growing up in the small town?
I think that the story is only loosely set in where in the place where I come from. The library, though, when I was a child. But I think it's more that when you're in a small place, everybody kind of wants to know your business, maybe, or there's a lot of gossip easily. And I do really think that people don't necessarily open up entirely. Also, in a way, easier to open up to people because it's not like it's suddenly what you say is going to turn into rumor and everybody in your town is going to know it. Not that
Mm,
anything like that has ever happened to me growing up in a small town, because I absolutely loved it growing up. But just when you get a bit of distance and you reflect on what it's like in a small town, I do think that people don't necessarily dare be completely vulnerable because you're afraid of being judged.
yeah, yeah. And talking about this writing for one person, of that saying, when you write, you have a target audience
Mhm.
in mind, you write for few people only. Do you have the target? Do you have a person or people you write for in your mind? Or
Um, I think it changes with each book. My first book, I actually wrote a book that I wanted to read.
mm,
So that's how that came about. But now I think at the moment when I'm writing, it's my target audience is my book club in Sweden that I started about 14 years ago. They still meet up every other month,
oh,
and they are my target audience for this book.
cool. I've seen a lot of
But I
films.
think you could have a person. If it makes it easier for you to have a person that you're writing to, I think that could
Mm.
make it easier. But that person could also be you, that you are telling yourself a story that you would like to read.
The person I love the most, myself. So be a love story, definitely, for me, myself.
It doesn't have to be about you. It could just be for
Yeah.
you.
I've, one of my favorite film directors, Woody Allen, and he said like Ingmar Bergman is the only artist remaining in cinema, the Swedish film director. And I've seen one of his films, Seven Seal. And is there any Swedish literature that you can recommend or that I should pay attention to?
Well, first of all, I really like Ingmar Bergman, and I was completely obsessed with him in my late teens, and I saw all of his movies because they're very dark, and I think that appealed to me at the time. And I think that is what runs through a lot of Scandinavian literature as the as a red kind of thread, is that it is very dark. I'm sure. Have you seen the TV series called The Bridge, which
No.
is between? No, it's really good. I recommend it. It might even
Okay.
be on Netflix.
Mm,
It takes place between Denmark and Sweden. It starts with a murder that's taken place on the bridge between Denmark and Sweden. Half the body is on the Danish side and half the body is on the Swedish side. So they have to work together. And I think, you know, the Danish and the Swedish, that sort of darkness that you find in their storytelling is quite similar. And I think we're drawn to that. And I don't know if it's because of the weather here that it's so dark. That could be why. I read a really good book by an author called Lena Anderson called Willful Disregard. It was called, which was also kind of a dark story, but it wasn't crime, because I think it's normally crime stories that become famous outside of here.
mm,
But it's a really lovely, complex story about a relationship between a poet and this other creator that she kind of looks up to. But I think it's that sort of that the inner turmoil, if you like, is very present in Scandinavian literature and TV and movies as well.
mm.
And so yeah, so I think there's so much that I would want to see translated for the rest of the world to see.
Yeah. Well, you think it's just the weather, or when I think about Sweden, I've never been there. And you think about like some people, like
Yeah.
especially the socialist people, they think about, if it's their
Hmm.
Shangri-La, they say, oh, if you can model our country according to Sweden, we'll have no problem.
Hmm.
Is their ideal society, right? Is it
Right.
really like this, or is there any other factor that plays in that literature, the dark literature, or those films?
Well, I would probably say that actually one of the things is that they are great supporters of culture in Sweden.
Hmm.
So I think that you don't necessarily have to be the tortured artist, you know, who sits in the cold and writes away. I think that's kind of an image that people associate being an artist with. But it's not necessarily like that. You know, that there is, like you say, there is a social welfare system in place, which means that everybody can get an education here. School is free, university is free. It creates equal opportunity, but also there's a lot of money being in culture. So I think that's really inspiring and should be really inspiring for the rest of the world.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I really commend them for that.
Yeah. And they consume a lot of coffee. Scandinavian countries, they have the highest consumption of coffee because of the weather. The cafes there must be amazing.
Sorry, I don't know. I don't drink coffee.
You don't drink coffee, all right? What do you drink
Yeah,
then?
but I don't drink coffee.
Tea?
I drink tea. Maybe
Yeah.
I spent too much time in England, maybe. But yes,
Yeah.
I moved from here to London. I was there for 10 years, and that's when I learned to appreciate tea. So I
Yeah.
love tea, but yeah, my parents have always drunk so much coffee. Mm.
What do you drink while you write? Do you drink or eat something to
Tea, yeah, tea. I
just
drink tea and
tea?
a lot of water, but tea, yeah, I
Yeah.
love tea. Mm.
Speaking of London, is there any good spots that you love going? I live there too. So any bars or
Okay.
cafes or museum you would love to go again?
I think the beauty of London is that you can always go to new places, but I do love Soho. I love all the restaurants in Soho. I like the life there.
Yeah.
I like the theaters. You know, when I go, I love Joe and the Juice, which I don't think is English actually. I think it might even be Danish.
Yeah.
I love sitting in there reading because it's so kind of dark and cozy. And I love the bookshops. There are so many incredible bookshops. I can't even single one out because I love all of them. I love the secondhand bookshops. I spent a lot of
Oh
time there
yeah.
when I was 18 going into those
Yeah.
shops. But even the big chains, you know, I think the way that they structure their bookshops really inspiring and really sort of encourages you to read.
Yeah. A lot of them are dying now because of the online business,
I
right? A lot of
know,
people.
which is really
Yeah.
unfortunate, but
Yeah.
I think a lot of them are going online. True.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, we have to support the small chains.
True. So
Also, not the small chains. I mean, the small independent shops. I mean, not the chains. I
Yeah,
think hopefully the
exactly.
chains
Yeah,
will
the
survive, but the
independence.
small independent book shops. Mm.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
I saw this tattoo, the saying from Mandela on your forearm.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I want you to know, is there any other mantra or motto you live by? So let's say if you're forced to put a tattoo on your forehead,
Mhm.
some
Yeah.
motto, or else you'll die. What will that say?
That will say smile. I would say
Smile.
smile, so that encourages others to smile. I think if we all smile, the world would just be a better place.
So how long you've been
That's
in
what it
Dubai
would say.
now?
Almost 10 years,
10
which,
years.
but I really ended up there by accident. And I think, it's kind of getting to the point that I'm very restless now. It's time to move on to some other place in the world.
Yeah.
Not sure where yet.
Yeah. Would you write a novel based on Dubai? Does it fascinate you like Sweden does? Or your second was a Chicago?
Yeah, maybe. I have a tendency to write about places once I've left. I think you have a better perspective when you look back on a place. I didn't write
Mm,
about Chicago when I lived there. I wrote about it
mm.
after I left. Same
All
with
right.
Sweden. I wrote about Sweden after I left. So another moment I'm writing about the UK. So I don't know. Maybe at a later stage.
Hmm.
Definitely
Right.
some fascinating stories there.
Yeah, I love living here. It's been 2 years and I meet all kinds of people. I do magic for a lot of people. I have so much work.
Yeah.
It inspires me, especially it depends where you're from, right? I'm from Bahrain, a small town.
Hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, I'll just love living here.
I think that's what I like the most is how international it is. I feel like I've learned so much about different cultures,
Mm,
and my children are learning so much about different cultures. And I think that's the real benefit. But I think it's like I'm the kind of person I never thought I'd stay for 10 years. That is just life that's happened. But I am definitely curious to try something else now and experiencing something different.
great. What books are you reading right now?
I'm reading Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel, which is like a huge book that I've wanted to read for ages.
Yeah.
It's a real brick of a book, and I've just started reading it now, and because I have a bit more time. And it's really good. I've just read Ruth Ware's Turn of the Key, which is kind of a ghost story. It's also really fascinating. So I try and read as much different, like try and vary my reading as much as possible. The answer.
During this quarantine period, I'm reading so much. I'm a slow reader, but I'm reading
Yeah.
so much. So I want you to recommend 3 books for me, which I can read. What 3 comes to your mind?
Right. So I would say My Sister, the Serial Killer, which is by a Nigerian author.
Mm,
And it's just incredible. It's short chapters, very punchy, very dark, very cleverly written. And I think it's her debut novel. I would definitely recommend that. It's a very easy read. And then An American Marriage by Tiara Jones. I don't know if you saw Tiara Jones was at the Literature Festival in Dubai in February. Fantastic author. Her book was selected by Oprah for her book club. And the book American Marriage is basically about a couple who are newly married, and he ends up in prison. He's innocent, but what it does to their relationship and just the way that she plays with the roles of what's expected of a woman and how she behaves. It's very interesting read, but it's also very beautifully written. She's an incredible writer. So I would read it just for that. I would read anything that she writes, to be honest with you. And if you want to read a classic, I would say Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, because it's so full of drama and interesting characters. I was obsessed with that book when I read it, and I feel like I should reread it now.
Tolstoy is going to take so much time. I have to lock myself somewhere. I have to be in jail to read that. I can't. I won't go for that.
Well,
But the
Anna
first 2,
Karenina,
but the first 2
Anna
looks
Karenina is
great.
not as long as War and Peace. War and Peace is a bit longer.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Because that's what comes to my mind when you think about Russian literature.
I know.
Big novels, but Dostoevsky
Yes.
has written some small ones like Gambler or Notes for Underground. They're small ones.
Right.
Yeah, very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I like Russian literature. It's fascinating.
Yeah, great. That's all the question I wanted to ask you. Thank you very much for doing this for
Thank
me.
you.
And I'm going to see you in Dubai, hopefully soon. And come to the
Definitely.
ladies' night
Will
again,
do.
and I'll perform for you again.
And what are you writing?
What am I writing?
Yeah,
All
that
right.
would be great.
First, I was working,
Yes, I'd love to know
Atlantis,
what you're writing.
Atlantis. I was a resident magician
Yes.
there. and I was supposed to have my
Mm-hmm.
own show starting end of May, but this pandemic happened, so we don't know
Right.
what's going to happen now. So I
Mm-hmm.
created a magic show based around the
Mm-hmm.
myth of Atlantis, lost civilization, the
Mm-hmm.
writings of Plato. So I wrote my own show. It took
Cool.
so much time. I read
Mm-hmm.
so much about lost civilization. It's just great. I was writing that,
Mm-hmm.
but I can feel there's some books inside me. I want to write right now journals, but I want to
Mm-hmm.
be more fiction. I want to write fiction. I want to write about
Right.
serial killer based in Dubai. So I'm fascinated by that. Definitely crime.
Yeah.
It interests me.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. That's
Yeah.
cool. Yeah. So just make sure you get a good police contact, because that will help you, with all your questions to get it right. Even though, you obviously you can take some liberties with the truth, but it's just good to know anyway how their procedures work,
Oh,
you
that's a
know?
good recommendation. I never thought of that.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
Cool. Cool.
Because there's so many readers and they know their stuff, especially crime writers. They read a lot of crime and they expect you to know your stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah? Mm.
Sure. Great. All right,
That would
Jessica.
be my advice.
Thank
Mhm.
you. Thank you for the advice. Jessica,
Cool.
nice to
Thank
talk to
you.
you. Thank you for doing this.
And you.
And where can people follow
Take
you?
care.
I'll link
Okay.
I'll link your website, their Instagram. Check it out, and your book from Amazon, which I'm reading right now. I'll link them below.
Cool. Yeah,
All right.
that's fine. I'm on Facebook and Instagram is what I use the most.
Cool. All right. See you
Yeah.
in Dubai. Hopefully soon.
All right.
Bye.
Cool.
Bye.
See you then. Take care. Bye.
Bye.